The night the river stopped whispering, it began on a night when the Klamath River seemed to stop breathing. The water, usually restless with the whisper of current and stone, lay strangely still. A cold fog rolled along the shoreline as if something had pushed the natural world into silence. And somewhere within that uneasy quiet, two fishermen noticed a small figure walking along the riverbank. At first, they thought it was a lost camp or someone, disoriented, maybe drunk, maybe injured. But as their flashlights swept across the dark gravel, the beam caught something that froze them in place. A girl, barefoot, clothes torn, skin scratched by branches and dusted with ash, moving slowly, almost mechanically, as if each step cost her more strength than she could afford. She didn't look more than 12 years old. Her hair was tangled with pine needles, and when she finally lifted her head toward the men, her eyes reflected the light in a way that made both of them step back. Not because she was threatening, but because she looked empty. Like someone who had wandered so far beyond pain that she no longer understood she was alive. The fisherman called out to her, but she didn't answer. She kept staring past them, toward the dark forest behind them, as though she expected something to emerge at any moment. When one of the men approached cautiously, she flinched it away from him, but behind him, as if hiding from something neither of them could see. And then, in a whisper so faint they first thought it was the wind, she finally spoke a single word. Tall. The men exchanged a look. Tall? What? A person? An animal? A warning. But the girl said nothing more. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into their arms with a weight that felt heavier than her size should allow. As if exhaustion had hollowed her out, they carried her to their truck, wrapped her in a jacket, and sped toward the nearest ranger station, unaware that this moment, this strange, silent child emerging from the forest would trigger one of the most unsettling investigations in Klamath County history. At the station, the girl barely responded to water or questions. She trembled violently whenever someone stood between her and the window facing the tree line. The rangers noted bruises, cuts, and burns that didn't match any simple explanation. Some were clean, geometric. Others looked like she had run through something scorching, and the ash on her clothing. It wasn't campfire ash. It was volcanic, old, the kind found near the restricted areas of Mount Shasta places no child could reach without days of hiking through dangerous terrain. When asked her name, she didn't answer. When asked where she had come from, she closed her eyes. But when the lights in the room flickered for a moment because of a power surge, she jolted upright, staring at the window again with wide, terrified eyes, as if she felt something out there, something approaching. The rangers radioed the sheriff. The sheriff radioed the state patrol. Before dawn, their quiet outpost became the center of a case none of them were prepared for. A girl with no name, no injuries that made sense, no explanation for how she reached the river alone. And a final detail the fishermen hadn't mentioned yet, a detail they would only share after several hours of questioning. When their flashlight had first caught the girl's silhouette on the riverbank, they swore she wasn't walking out of the woods. They swore she was walking toward them from the water itself. A child with no name approximately equals 3,950 characters, voix off anglais dramati. The ambulance ride to the regional hospital should have been routine, but nothing about the girl felt routine. The paramedics noted it within the first minute. She didn't react to pain tests, didn't speak, didn't move unless guided at. Her eyes were constantly searching the corners of the vehicle. Not the people, the corners. As if she expected something to materialize out of the shadows. One paramedic described it later as watching a prey animal trapped in an invisible cage. She wasn't scared of them. She was scared of something that wasn't there. At the hospital, the staff quickly realized they were dealing with a medical anomaly. Her body temperature was low, far too low for someone who had supposedly walked miles through the forest. Her dehydration levels were severe, but not consistent, almost as if she had gone through rapid cycles of extreme heat and cold. Her muscles showed signs of overexertion, usually seen in long-distance hikers or military trainees. And yet, she weighed almost nothing. A small, fragile frame that didn't match the evidence of what she'd endured. The doctors tried asking her basic questions: name, age, address, anything. But each attempt was met with the same unsettling response. She would turn her head slowly, scanning the door, the windows, the space above the IV stand. Like she wasn't listening to the words, she was listening for something else, something approaching. When a nurse asked her gently if someone had been chasing her, the girl didn't speak. She didn't nod. She didn't react in any normal way. Instead, she lifted her hand, pointed toward the darkened hallway outside her room, and then pulled the blanket up to her chin as if bracing for a cold wind that none of the adults could feel. The hospital's first priority was identification, but the girl had no ID, no jewelry, no distinguishing marks, except a strange series of parallel burns on her left arm, burns that seemed to clean, too straight to come from branches or rocks. She didn't match any missing child bulletin from Oregon, Washington, or Northern California. The sheriff ran her fingerprints through federal databases. Nothing. Her face was scanned through national missing person systems. No match. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere. Meanwhile, her behavior grew stranger. When staff members entered the room, She would glance past them, nod at them, with the silent precision of someone tracking movement in the dark. A doctor dropped a clipboard accidentally, and the sound made her sit bolt upright, eyes fixed toward the ceiling tiles, as if something above them had been disturbed. She couldn't or wouldn't sleep. Every time her eyelids drooped, she would snap them open again, shaking her head violently, refusing to slip into unconsciousness. By morning, the sheriff arrived to conduct a more formal interview. He began with slow, careful questions, trying to ground her with details. "Do you know where you are? Are you hurt? Do you need help?" She didn't answer. But halfway through the interview, she suddenly whispered something, her first voluntary words since her rescue. "They're still coming." The sheriff froze. "Who's coming?" But the girl shut down again, curling into herself, eyes fixed on the doorway. 20 minutes later, when a technician walked by with a rolling cart, the girl reacted with a panic so intense the nurses had to restrain her. Not because she was violent, but because she was trying to climb off the bed and hide under it. The medical report compiled after her first day was chilling in its contradictions. Severe dehydration, but no kidney damage. Overexertion, but no muscle tears. Exposure burns, but no infection. Shock trauma, but no identifiable injury. And the final note, written by the attending pediatrician: "Patient repeatedly checks the room's exit points. Not afraid of us. Afraid of what might follow." Traces from a forbidden place, the mystery deepened the moment the hospital laboratory submitted its preliminary report. At first, no one paid much attention. Dust on a child. As clothing is hardly unusual in the forests of Northern California, but the residue found on her shoes, her hair, and the burns along her arm didn't match forest soil. It didn't match road sediment either. It was something far more specific, and far more alarming. The particles were volcanic in origin, not common volcanic dust, but ash with a very particular composition, high in hornblende and andesite, enriched with microcrystals that formed only at extreme subterranean temperatures. A geological signature so distinctive that any expert could pinpoint its source with unsettling accuracy. There was only one place in the region where this exact combination existed: the restricted volcanic vents on the upper eastern flank of Mount Shasta, an area fenced off, monitored, and closed to the public since 1997 because of ground instability and lethal gas emissions. A place where avalanches, toxic pockets, and sudden fumarole outbursts had killed trained climbers. A place no child, no matter how determined, could reach alone. Yet the ash coating the girl's clothes came from there. When the sheriff confronted the hospital geologist, he initially thought it had to be a lab mix-up, contamination, mislabeling, anything. But the geologist shook his head, showing magnified images of the residue, microscopic volcanic glass shards, still sharp, still capable of causing the strange, linear burns on her arm. "This isn't trail dust," he said. "Someone took her into the vents. Someone brought her into the dead zone." But the sheriff knew the terrain. The dead zone was a maze of collapsed lava tubes, sulfur deposits, and hidden crevasses. Even seasoned mountaineers avoided it. Rangers patrolled it only twice a year, and only in full teams. Bringing a child there wasn't just dangerous, it was impossible without leaving tracks, equipment, or at least fresh rope marks on the access points. No such signs had been found. Meanwhile, the girl's behavior now made a disturbing kind of sense. Her constant glances over her shoulder, her hypervigilance, her refusal to sleep, these weren't random reactions. They were the reflexes of someone who had escaped something catastrophic, something she believed might still be following her down the mountain. The sheriff drove to the hospital to ask her directly. When he entered her room, he placed the small plastic vial of volcanic ash on the bedside table. The girl noticed it immediately. Her eyes widened on in recognition, but in fear. Real, visceral fear. The kind of fear that tightens the throat and drains the blood from the face. He asked her softly, "Were you on the mountain? Did someone take you up there?" She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her hand and brushed her fingers against the burn marks on her arm, the clean, parallel lines that looked almost too perfect to be natural. Then she made a small gesture, subtle but unmistakable. She pointed upward, not to the ceiling, not to the hospital floor above, but beyond, to altitude, to height, to the mountain itself. The sheriff leaned closer. "What happened up there?" The girl finally whispered. "Not supposed to go." "Who took you?" She shook her head, tears forming, her gaze locked at the corner of the room, as if something unseen waited there. The sheriff stood frozen. There were hundreds of places a lost child might wander, but not the restricted vents of Mount Shasta, not the forbidden zone the locals called the place where footsteps vanish. How had she reached it? How had she survived it? And more terrifying, why had she run from it? The volcanic ash answered only one question. Every other question grew darker. The Karuk warning approximately equals 3950 Karaksos Voiksov, Anglais, Tundramatic et cinematography. The sheriff had heard rumors before whispers from hikers. Fragments of late-night campfire stories, but nothing prepared him for what the Karuk elders would tell him. Mount Shasta wasn't just a geological landmark to them. It was a living presence, a guardian, and sometimes a warning. When the mysterious girl was found, the sheriff decided he needed answers that science couldn't give. So he drove north to the Karuk community near Happy Camp, where the oldest stories of the mountain were preserved. Elder Thomas Capeish, thin as a cedar branch and sharpied, despite his age, listened without interruption as the sheriff described the girl, her burns, her terror, and the volcanic ash from the restricted vents. When the sheriff finished, the elder exhaled slowly, as if the weight of the story pressed directly on his chest. "You say she keeps looking behind her," Thomas murmured. "That is not the behavior of a lost child. That is the behavior of someone who has seen." "Seen what?" the sheriff asked. Thomas didn't reply immediately. Instead, he stepped into his lodge and returned with a small woven pouch. From it, he poured a handful of blackish almos, identical to the sample recovered from the girl. "Our people call this the breath of the deep mountain. It marks places where the world is thin." "The world is thin," the sheriff repeated. Thomas nodded. Where things cross, the sheriff felt the room tighten around him. He tried to stay rational, grounded. But the elder continued, his voice low and unwavering. "There is an old word in our language, unexplained. It means the tall shadow, a watcher, a presence that moves between trees when the mist rises. Most do not speak of it now. They think these stories belong to old men like me, but they forget. The mountain does not forget." He lifted his gaze, fixing the sheriff with a seriousness that sent a chill along the spine. "Before the girl was found, our hunters saw signs. Branches bent too high for any animal. Footprints that were deep, heavy, but faded faster than they should. And silhouettes in the trees. Very tall silhouettes." The sheriff frowned. "Silhouettes? You mean people?" Thomas hesitated. "Not people. Not exactly." He pointed toward the forest outside. "Something has been moving down the slopes these past nights. Something we have not seen in generations. When the mist comes, it stretches tall, like a shadow that grew bones." The sheriff tried to dismiss it, but his mind replayed the girl's expression every time someone walked behind her, pure dread. Instinctive, primal. "Are you saying this thing took her?" "No," the elder answered, shaking his head. "Unexplained does not take, it follows, it waits. It does not pursue the strong or the prepared." He paused, then added quietly, "It follows those who wander alone into forbidden places." Forbidden places. The restricted vents, the volcanic ash, the burns. The sheriff suddenly felt an icy shiver climb his back. "What does it want?" he asked. Thomas closed the pouch, sealing the ash inside. "It wants nothing. It only watches. But those who see it rarely stay unchanged." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, bending them just enough to suggest movement. Tall, vertical, wavering, the sheriff turned toward the forest, half expecting to see something standing between the trunks, something dark and impossibly still. He swallowed hard. "You think she saw this? Tall shadow." Thomas lowered himself onto a wooden bench, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think," he said, "it followed her down the mountain. And I think she knows it is not finished with her." The sheriff felt the weight of those words settle like cold stone in his stomach. Suddenly, the mystery was no longer about where the girl had been, but what might have followed her. The FBI steps and the sheriff had barely returned from his meeting with the Karuk elder when two black SUVs rolled into the hospital parking lot and marked, silent, and unmistakably federal. Their arrival wasn't announced, requested, or welcomed. But the moment the agents stepped out, the sheriff knew the case had just shifted into a new and far more dangerous category. Agent Samuel Mercer showed his badge only long enough to make a point. His partner, Agent Lauren Hale, headed straight for the reception desk, already demanding access to the girl's room. The sheriff stopped them. "She's stable," he said firmly, "but terrified. And she has no identity. Nobody even knows her name." Mercer didn't blink. "We know enough," the sheriff frowned. "Enough for what?" Mercer lowered his voice. "To classify this case as a potential federal abduction?" The word abduction hit the sheriff like a punch. Baihucha was alone in the forest. Mercer exchanged a glance with Hale. "We don't think she was alone." Something cold tightened in the sheriff's stomach. He remembered the elder's warning, the bent branches, the footprints that faded too fast, the silhouettes moving between the trees, things he hadn't dared put into a report. Hale handed him a thin folder. 4 disappearances in the Shasta region over the last 12 years. All unsolved, all children, all without IDs or family connections. The sheriff opened the file. Photos stared back at him, faces that were young, frightened, and forever missing. One disappeared from a campsite, another from a hiking trail, one from a rural road at dusk. But the last one stopped him cold. A boy, 9 years old, found wandering alone near the same restricted volcanic vents. He had been dehydrated, burned, and unable to speak coherently. He vanished again 2 days later. The sheriff looked up sharply. Why wasn't this public? Why didn't local law enforcement know? Because the Bureau sealed the case, Hale answered. "Just like we're sealing this one." A chill ran across the sheriff's skin. "Sealing. She's alive. She needs help, not classification." Mercer's expression hardened. "You don't understand, Sheriff. These aren't normal cases. Every child found near Shasta shows the same anomalies, burns without source, volcanic residue from zones no one should reach, and the same behavioral pattern." "What pattern?" the sheriff asked. Hale's voice dropped to a near whisper. They all constantly look over their shoulder, as if something followed them back. The sheriff felt his pulse slow. His mind went back to the hospital bed, the girl's eyes darting to the corner of the room, her breath catching whenever the door opened, as though she expected a towering silhouette to step inside. Mercer continued, opening a second file. Here's what ties every incident together. Each child was found within 24 hours of a reported sighting in the woods by local residents. Tall figures, silent, watching. The sheriff's breath caught on foot, the tall shadow. He pushed the file back. You think these kids were taken by what, some kind of person, group, cult? Mercer paused. We don't know, but whatever is operating in those woods, it leaves no tracks, no witnesses, and no viable forensic evidence. It's as if the forest itself is hiding something. And the volcanic ash? The sheriff asked. Hale closed the folder. That's the part that concerns us most. Those vents are off limits for a reason. No child should survive being near them. And yet, they do. Just long enough to be found. Mercer straightened. As of now, this case is federal. You'll continue assisting, but all files, reports, and statements will fall under Bureau jurisdiction. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Meaning you'll bury it. Meaning Mercer corrected sharply. We will contain it. At that moment, a nurse rushed out of the hospital doors. Sheriff, agents, the girl, she's awake again. But she's panicking. She keeps repeating something. What is she saying? The sheriff asked. The nurse hesitated, shaken. She keeps saying, it found me. The sheriff's blood froze. Hale exchanged a grim look with Mercer. Get a secure room, double the guards, Mercer added. And whatever happens, do not let her look out the window. The FBI steps in. The sheriff had barely returned from his meeting with the Karuk elder when two black SUVs rolled into the hospital parking lot and marked silent and unmistakably federal. Their arrival wasn't announced, requested, or welcomed. But the moment the agents stepped out, the sheriff knew the case had just shifted into a new and far more dangerous category. Agent Samuel Mercer showed his badge only long enough to make a point. His partner, Agent Lauren Hale, headed straight for the reception desk, already demanding access to the girl's room. The sheriff stopped them. She's stable, he said firmly, but terrified. And she has no identity. Nobody even knows her name. Mercer didn't blink. We know enough, the sheriff frowned. Enough for what? Mercer lowered his voice. To classify this case as a potential federal abduction? The word abduction hit the sheriff like a punch. Baihucha was alone in the forest. Mercer exchanged a glance with Hale. We don't think she was alone. Something cold tightened in the sheriff's stomach. He remembered the elder's warning. The bent branches. The footprints that faded too fast. The silhouettes moving between the trees. Things he hadn't dared put into a report. Hale handed him a thin folder. For disappearances in the Shasta region over the last 12 years. All unsolved, all children. All without IDs or family connections. The sheriff opened the file. Photos stared back at him, faces that were young, frightened, and forever missing. One disappeared from a campsite, another from a hiking trail, one from a rural road at dusk. But the last one stopped him cold. A boy, 9 years old, found wandering alone near the same restricted volcanic vents. He had been dehydrated, burned, and unable to speak coherently. He vanished again 2 days later. The sheriff looked up sharply. Why wasn't this public? Why didn't local law enforcement know? Because the Bureau sealed the case, Hale answered. Just like we're sealing this one. A chill ran across the sheriff's skin. Sealing? She's alive. She needs help, not classification. Mercer's expression hardened. You don't understand, Sheriff. These aren't normal cases. Every child found near Shasta shows the same anomalies, burns without source. Volcanic residue from zones no one should reach, and the same behavioral pattern. What pattern? The sheriff asked. Hale's voice dropped to a near whisper. They all constantly look over their shoulder, as if something followed them back. The sheriff felt his pulse slow. His mind went back to the hospital bed, the girl's eyes darting to the corner of the room, her breath catching whenever the door opened, as though she expected a towering silhouette to step inside. Mercer continued, opening a second file. Here's what ties every incident together. Each child was found within 24 hours of a reported sighting in the woods by local residents. Tall figures, silent, watching. The sheriff's breath caught on foot, the tall shadow. He pushed the file back. You think these kids were taken by what, some kind of person, group, cult? Mercer paused. We don't know, but whatever is operating in those woods, it leaves no tracks, no witnesses, and no viable forensic evidence. It's as if the forest itself is hiding something. And the volcanic ash? The sheriff asked. Hale closed the folder. That's the part that concerns us most. Those vents are off limits for a reason. No child should survive being near them. And yet, they do. Just long enough to be found. Mercer straightened. As of now, this case is federal. You'll continue assisting, but all files, reports, and statements will fall under Bureau jurisdiction. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Meaning you'll bury it. Meaning Mercer corrected sharply. We will contain it. At that moment, a nurse rushed out of the hospital doors. Sheriff, agents, the girl, she's awake again. But she's panicking. She keeps repeating something. What is she saying? The sheriff asked. The nurse hesitated, shaken. "She keeps saying, 'It found me.'" The sheriff's blood froze. Hale exchanged a grim look with Mercer. "Get a secure room, double the guards," Mercer added. "And whatever happens, do not let her look out the window."
The burned circle, they reached the location just after dawn, when the forest still carried the cold breath of the night. Agent Ruiz expected another false lead, another patch of disturbed soil or a campsite left by hikers. But as soon as she stepped out of the vehicle, the silence wrapped around her like something deliberate, something watchful. Even the wind seemed to halt at the tree line, and then she saw it. 3 miles from where the girl had been found, the forest floor opened into a clearing so abruptly perfect it looked carved by a machine, a circle exact, symmetrical, 25 feet across. Nothing inside it remained alive. Ruiz crouched at the edge, brushing her fingers over the dead soil. The top layer wasn't just burned, it was vitrified, fused into a thin sheet of glass, as if exposed to temperatures far beyond natural fire. But there were no matches, no fuel traces, no lightning scars. And the burn stopped with surgical precision at the line of the circle. The trees surrounding the perimeter told an even stranger story. Their bark had been stripped vertically from the roots to the first branches, leaving long pale wounds like something had reached out with many hands at once and peeled them open. Yet the inner wood showed no scorch marks. No heat had touched them. It was as if the trees themselves had recoiled, shedding their protective layers in a moment of pure terror. Agent Ruiz walked the circumference slowly, looking for footprints, tire tracks, any sign of human presence. There was nothing. No animals, no insects, not even the usual scatter of pine needles that should have naturally fallen overnight. The air inside the ring felt heavier, almost humming, as though carrying the aftershock of a force that had recently been released. Ruiz felt her skin prickle, the same sensation she experienced near high-voltage equipment, except there were no power lines for miles. The forensic team joined her, baffled. One knelt to take a sample but hesitated, whispering that the ground felt wrong, as if it were slightly vibrating. Another pointed out faint spiraling patterns etched into the glassy surface marks, too smooth, too uniform to be created by hand or by the chaotic spread of fire. They resembled the whirls left by something rotating, descending, or emerging. Ruiz's gaze drifted toward the forest, and something icy tightened in her chest. She remembered the girl, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder at the hospital, as though expecting a shape to materialize at any moment. Ruiz wasn't superstitious, but standing here, she could not shake the feeling that the child hadn't escaped something. She had been released by it. One agent called her over to the far side of the circle. There, embedded just beyond the burnt perimeter, lay a footprint in the soft earth. But it wasn't the girl's. It was too large, far too large, jammed sunk deep, as if made by something incredibly heavy. The heel was elongated, the arch impossibly high, and at the front, instead of toes, 3 narrow impressions stretched forward like talons. Ruiz froze. The print faced toward the circle, not away from it. Whatever had stood here had not fled. It had watched, and as the first rays of sunlight touched the clearing, Ruiz felt an instinctive truth rise in her mind, now welcome, undeniable. This was not the place where the girl had been harmed. This was the place where something else had come through, something that might still be near.
What the girl drew for 2 days? The girl said nothing. No name, no explanation, no reaction when doctors gently questioned her. She only sat upright in her hospital bed, eyes fixed on a spot just behind every person who entered the room, as if something stood there silent, patient, unseen by everyone but her. It wasn't until a child psychologist brought crayons and paper that something shifted. At first, she ignored them. Then, slowly, with a trembling hand, she picked up a charcoal stick and began to draw. The staff had expected childish scribbles, maybe a house, a tree, a family, anything normal. But what emerged was not normal. The first drawing was a tall figure, far taller than any human should, its torso narrow, almost skeletal, its limbs impossibly long. The arms hung down nearly to its knees, ending in elongated shapes that suggested fingers, but not human ones. The head was small, oval, devoid of features, except for 2 hollow circles where eyes should be. There was no mouth, no nose, only the empty gaze of something that watched, without blinking. The psychologist gently asked, "Is this someone you saw?" The girl didn't answer. She simply drew another one. This time, the figure stood behind a smaller shape, clearly a child. The proportions matched her own silhouette. The small slumped shoulders, the short legs, the way she held her arms close to her chest, and towering behind her, touching nothing yet dominating the entire page, was the same thin humanoid, its long arms curved like crescents, as if encircling her, or claiming her. A shiver ran through the staff. The psychologist noted the shaky lines, the frantic pressure where she had gone over the limbs again and again, almost as if reinforcing something she desperately wanted adults to understand. Doctors whispered about trauma responses, hallucinations caused by shock, visual artifacts from dehydration and fear, but none of their explanations accounted for what happened next. When the Karuk elders were shown the drawings brought in by Agent Ruiz for cultural context, the room fell into a heavy silence. The oldest elder, a man with silver braids and clouded eyes, placed a trembling hand on the paper. He did not touch the figure, he touched the child. "This," he said softly, "is not a sickness of the mind." Ruiz leaned in. "Then what is it?" The elder exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much truth the room could bear. "Our people have seen this shape before, not often, and never without consequence." He tapped the figure's elongated arm. "We call it Anshvata, tall shadow. It walks between worlds. It is not spirit, not animal, not man. When a child is taken by it, they return changed, silent, watchful, as if part of them stayed where the tall shadow lives." Ruiz felt an icy pressure tighten in her chest. The girl was found outside the forbidden area of the mountain. The elder nodded. Then she crossed paths with something humans were not meant to meet. Another elder pointed at the second drawing, the one where the figure hovered behind the girl. "She did not draw this to show us what she saw. She drew it to show us what still follows her." The room went silent. The girl, sitting on her hospital bed just outside the hall, kept her eyes fixed on the doorway, not on the people gathered inside, but on an empty stretch of air behind them. Her small fingers clutched the charcoal stick so tightly it snapped in half. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She only whispered one sentence under her breath, barely audible, but clear enough for Agent Ruiz to hear. "It's not done with me." Patterns in the forest. When Agent Ruiz realized the girl's drawings matched ancient Karuk legends, she widened the investigation far beyond the girl's case. She pulled every archived report, missing person entry, ranger log, tribal testimony, an unclassified document related to the slopes of Mount Shasta for the last 20 years. What emerged was not a timeline, but a pattern so consistent, so quietly repeating, that she wondered how no one had connected it before. It began with sound. Across 2 decades, hikers, hunters, and forest workers had reported hearing strange noises in the woods, always at night, always near the same 3-mile radius where the girl had been found. Some described it as a metallic scraping, like steel dragged across stone. Others said it resembled a deep, animalistic exhale, long and wet, coming from above them rather than around. And yet, no known animal in the region could produce anything close to those frequencies. One report from 2007 came from a seasoned firefighter who had camped near Mud Creek Rim. He described waking to what he called breathing that wasn't human, wasn't animal, something mixed between the two. When he shined his flashlight into the trees, the sound stopped instantly, followed by a single loud crack, as if something enormous had shifted its weight. Another entry from 2012 involved a pair of hikers who claimed they heard what sounded like a child, crying deep in the forest at 3 a.m. They followed the sound for nearly 15 minutes, before it suddenly shifted position, jumping from one side of the trail to the other, then behind them without footsteps or movement in between. The hikers later admitted the only reason they survived was because fear forced them to sprint downhill without looking back. None of these accounts were officially published. Most were dismissed as stress, fatigue, or misidentification, but Ruiz noticed something else. Every incident occurred during periods when volcanic vents emitted particularly high levels of geothermal heat conditions known to alter animal behavior, but not to create humanoid shadows in the night. Then came the disappearances. Not the major ones, the famous Shasta cases that made national news, but the brief ones. The minor vanishings hidden in the margins of police reports, a child lost for 6 hours, found with no memory, a hunter missing overnight, discovered barefoot, insisting he had been watched, a geologist who vanished during a survey and reappeared 2 days later, dehydrated yet unharmed, refusing to discuss where he had gone, only saying, "The forest isn't empty." Ruiz mapped these events. The dots formed a crescent shape along the restricted northern boundary of the mountain, exactly where the Karuk elder said the tall shadow walked. But one case stood out, a 1999 ranger log, never digitized, handwritten in faded ink. It described a man who had stumbled out of the woods at dawn, mumbling incoherently. He kept repeating the same phrase, "It was behind me." It never touched the ground. The ranger noted no visible injuries, but profound psychological distress. Reading the report, Ruiz felt a tightness forming at the base of her spine. The exact same look of distress was now on the face of the girl in the hospital. As she assembled all the testimonies, one theme echoed again and again. Something was moving in those forests long before the girl appeared. Something that didn't behave like an animal, didn't leave tracks, didn't follow natural patterns. Something that watched, and every 22-23 months, the reports flared like a cycle, a rhythm. The girl's case wasn't an isolated event. It was the latest point on a timeline stretching back farther than any official wanted to admit. Ruiz took a step back from the evidence wall she had built, strings connecting every photo and report. A chill ran down her arms. She realized that the girl's drawings were not a child's hallucination. They were, data observed, remembered, repeated, a perfect match for a presence that had been stalking Mount Shasta for decades. And somewhere deep in the forest, the rhythm was about to repeat it. The vanishing point, the girl had been silent for nearly 48 hours, barely speaking, barely moving, staring at corners of the room as if waiting for something to step out of them. Nurses whispered that she slept with her eyes half open, like someone who didn't trust the darkness to stay still. Then came the night the hospital lights began to fail. It was just past 2:13 a.m. when the first flicker rippled through the pediatric wing, a brief pulse like a heartbeat in the power lines. The nurses assumed it was a routine voltage fluctuation, old building, old wiring. But when it happened again, longer this time, every patient monitor dipped into a low hum, screens dimming as if something unseen was drawing electricity out of the air. Agent Ruiz was asleep in a plastic chair beside the girl's bed when the child suddenly bolted upright with a scream that tore through the corridor. "It's here." Her voice was sharp, primal, nothing like the quiet, fragile whispers she had used before. She clutched the blankets to her chest and stared at the door, not as if someone were coming, but as if someone had already been standing there for a very long time. Ruiz jumped up, trying to calm her, but the girl recoiled, shaking violently. A cold draft swept through the room, though every window was sealed. The ceiling light flickered harder, strobing the walls in harsh bursts of white. Outside the room, footsteps echoed slow, uneven, as if someone were dragging their feet across polished linoleum. Ruiz opened the door, but the hallway was empty, silent, except for the rhythmic clicking of a light panel struggling to stay alive. Suddenly, the girl pointed at the far corner of the room. "There," she whispered. "Don't look at it. Don't look at it too long." Ruiz saw nothing, and yet something felt wrong. The air in that corner seemed thicker, as if bending subtly, like heat distortion on asphalt. A shape that wasn't a shape, a presence without form. Then all at once, the heart monitor beside the bed spiked wildly. The girl's pulse jumped to impossible levels: 160, 170, 183 beats per minute. Ruiz grabbed her radio, demanding a doctor, but the radio only emitted static, a low, grinding distortion she had never heard from any device. The girl pressed her hands over her ears. "Stop it, stop it, it's talking too loud." Ruiz froze. The room was silent, nothing, no sound, no voices. "What is talking?" she whispered. The girl looked at her, pupils dilated to black circles that swallowed the whites of her eyes. "The tall one, the one from the fire circle. It followed me back." The lights abruptly went out. For 3 seconds, the hospital plunged into total darkness. Not dimness, total blackout. A suffocating void where Ruiz could not see her own hands in front of her face. She reached toward the bed, panicking. And then the emergency lights kicked in, flooding the room with red alarms. The girl was no longer sitting. She was standing beside the window, her small silhouette frozen against the crimson glow. Her hand was pressed flat against the glass, as though feeling for something outside. Ruiz called her name. The girl didn't turn. Instead, she whispered one word with a calmness more terrifying than the scream that had awakened the entire floor. "Run!" Nurses burst into the room, followed by 2 security guards, but the girl backed away from them, trembling, pointing again to that same corner, the one that seemed to bend the air. "It wants to finish what it started," she said, and just like that, every light returned to normal. The monitors steadied. The corridor fell still. But for Ruiz, the most chilling part came when one of the nurses checked the security feeds for the minute of the blackout. Every camera in the pediatric wing had glitched at 2:14 a.m., recording nothing but darkness, except one. The camera facing the girl's room captured a single frame, a distorted silhouette stretched across the doorway. Tall, thin, wrong, the same shape the girl had drawn. Ruiz stared at the screen, her stomach turning to ice. Whatever followed that girl out of the Shasta woods had found her again. The disappearance, no camera caught for 3 days after the incident in the hospital room. The girl, known only as Jane Doe, was kept under constant surveillance. 2 agents posted outside her door, monitors tracking every breath she took, for cameras covering every angle of the pediatric wing. No one wanted to admit it, but the unspoken truth hung in the air like static. Whatever had followed her out of the forest might not be finished. On the morning of her disappearance, everything seemed normal. Routine checks, breakfast delivered, a nurse humming softly as she entered the room at 7:14 a.m. The bed was made, the monitoring equipment neatly arranged, but the girl was gone, not escaped, not missing, gone, as if she had never been there at all. The nurse froze, drop tray crashing to the floor. The agents rushed in seconds later. For 40 minutes, the wing was locked down, doors sealed, elevators shut off, no one allowed to enter or leave. Every hallway swept 3 times, every room checked, and yet the child had vanished. There was no sign of struggle, no footprints, no forced entry. Even the window was secured with a magnetic lock that would have triggered an alarm if it so much as shifted half an inch. The staff checked the cameras next, every feed, every angle, and that was when the impossible became undeniable. In between 7:07 and 7:14 a.m., the exact 7-minute window when she vanished, not a single camera had recorded her leaving. No silhouette, no shadow, not even motion detected near the room. The cameras remained perfectly functional, no glitches, no blackouts. She simply stopped appearing on them. 1 second she was in frame, in the next, the bed was empty. There was no footage of her walking out, no footage of anyone entering, not even footage of the door opening. The FBI immediately sealed the floor, confiscated every digital file, and ordered the hospital staff into silence. Ruiz was interrogated for nearly 6 hours, but her answer never changed. She didn't leave. She disappeared. When the news broke, the local papers didn't try to soften it. Mysterious case of human evaporation in Mount Shasta investigation. Child vanishes without exit, no footage, no trace. One journalist coined the term that would spread like wildfire online: the Shasta vanishing. People across Northern California speculated wildly: kidnapping, cult activity, a federal cover-up. But none of these explanations addressed the one fact investigators couldn't escape. There was no physical way out. Every access point had been locked or guarded. Every camera reviewed frame by frame. Every second accounted for. There was only one abnormal detail, one overlooked anomaly. Ruiz couldn't stop replaying. At exactly 7:11 a.m., 3 minutes before the girl vanished, the camera inside the room captured a faint shift in lighting, like a brief shadow passing between the lens and the bed. A form too tall to belong to the girl, too thin to be human, and too fast to be natural. Investigators dismissed it as digital noise. Ruiz didn't. When she zoomed in later, frame by frame, the shadow seemed to stretch downward, toward the bed as if leaning over it. And then, without transition, without movement, the bed was empty. That night, Ruiz returned to the room alone. She stood in the darkness, feeling the cold spots lingering near the corners. The same corners the girl used to stare at. She whispered into the empty air, "Where did you go?" There was no answer, just the quiet hum of machines. But for a moment, Ruiz thought she felt breath brush against the back of her neck. Not warm, cold, a presence, a reminder. Whatever took Jane Doe had never left the missing files. The day after Jane Doe vanished, Sheriff Daniel Whitaker walked into his office to finish the report he'd started the night before. He had barely slept, his mind replayed the impossible events on a loop. Still, he forced himself into the familiar rhythm. Unlock the door, switch on the desk lamp, review the evidence, except this time, there was nothing to review. The thick case folder he'd placed on the center of his desk was gone. Not misplaced. Not borrowed by a deputy. Gone. Whitaker froze. He checked under the desk, behind the filing cabinet, even the trash bin. Nothing. He opened the drawer where he had stored the supplemental files, photos, statements, GPS logs, empty. He moved to the evidence locker, heart pounding. The shelf where the Shasta case files had rested the night before was bare. All of it had vanished. For a sheriff with 29 years of service, the sensation was worse than fear. It felt like someone had reached directly into his mind and stolen his ability to understand what was happening. He stumbled back into his office, breath unsteady, staring at the single object left behind. A handwritten inventory sheet. The paper hadn't been there the night before. He was sure of it. Across its surface, in neat, mechanical handwriting, someone had listed every item missing from the case. Jane Doe admission notes, Ruiz's statement, hospital camera logs, GPS trace of forest search, burned circle photographs, preliminary FBI correspondence, unknown ash sample, room activity timeline. All sketches made by Jane Doe, everything except the paper itself. At the bottom of the inventory, a final line had been added in different ink, as if in haste. Return not authorized. Whitaker felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't a man prone to superstition, but this felt like the work of something that wanted the truth erased. He called the FBI field office. An agent answered. "We didn't take anything," she insisted. Her tone was clipped, defensive. "We haven't touched your records, not a single document." Whitaker pressed her, voice rising. "You're telling me someone walked into my office, cracked my locker, removed 2 pounds of documents and left me a grocery list?" The agent didn't budge. "Sheriff, whatever you're missing, it wasn't us." And yet, when Whitaker asked for the federal case number, something strange happened. The agent fell silent. He could hear her flipping through papers, muttering, "Finally, I'm not seeing the file here. You lost yours too," Whitaker shot back. "No," she whispered. "It's not missing. It's like it never existed. There's no entry, not even a placeholder. As far as our system is concerned, this case was never opened." Whitaker hung up, a hollow pit forming in his stomach. He returned to the inventory sheet, studying it under the harsh glow of the desk lamp. The handwriting was unnervingly precise, no corrections, no hesitation. The kind of script that didn't look written so much as dictated. He compared ink thickness, pressure marks, indentation patterns. One detail made his skin crawl. There were no indentation marks at all, no pressure on the paper, no trace of a pen tip, as if the letters had appeared without being written. He checked the security footage next, pulling up the overnight recordings. The hallway outside his office showed nothing unusual. No intruders, no deputies, no shadows, no motion at all. But when he viewed the footage inside his office, he stopped breathing. Between 2:13 and 2:14 a.m., a single frame glitched to Swannon. The file folders on the desk disappeared from one frame to the next. No figure, no movement, no disturbance. One frame, files present. Next frame, desk empty. The timing matched the girl's disappearance almost exactly. Same unexplained lapse, same absence of physical evidence, same invisible intrusion. Whitaker sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by a truth he could barely admit, even to himself. Someone or something was cleaning up behind her, erasing footprints, scrubbing trails, ensuring that whatever Jane Doe had escaped from would remain hidden. And as he examined the blank, impossible inventory sheet once more, he understood the threat clearly. If the files could disappear, so could he. Declassified, but not explained when the first documents surfaced in the early 2000s. They were released quietly, almost reluctantly, buried among thousands of unrelated federal files. No announcement, no explanation. Just a thin, fragile folder stamped declassified, limited distribution. The kind of thing only a determined researcher or an unlucky archivist could stumble upon. And inside, only 23 pages survived. 23 pages for a disappearance that had shaken an entire region. The first thing investigators noticed was the tone. The documents were factual, sterile, almost aggressively unemotional. They never used the girl's name. She was reduced to a designation. Subject A12. Not Jane Doe, not the missing child. Just an entry, a variable. But the strangest part wasn't what the file said. It was what it avoided saying. The early pages referenced unidentified luminosities observed around the ridge where the girl had been found. Short bursts of white light recorded by 2 patrol units, accompanied by unexplained radio interference. The logs described abrupt drops in temperature up to 15 degrees in less than a minute, and an oscillating hum, too regular to be natural, but too irregular to be mechanical. And yet, every paragraph ended the same way, 'cause undetermined. There was mention of the burned site carefully documented, photographed, analyzed. The shape, the radius, the absence of accelerants, the clean, sterile perimeter. But even in the official report, the conclusion was painfully vague. Thermal event, inconsistent with known wildfire or combustion profiles. Nothing more, nothing less. No theory, no hypothesis. Just a fact, suspended in darkness. Several sections had been fully redacted. Black ink covered entire paragraphs. Entire pages, sometimes leaving only a single surviving word floating in the void. Entity, another page. Non-human morphology, a third. Protocol deviation, fragments. Nothing but fragments. Tucked near the end was a short, chilling addendum dated 8 months after her disappearance. It referenced a secondary incident in the same region, though all details except one sentence had been removed. Environmental markers consistent with a 1-2 case, no coordinates, no witnesses, no body. Just a hint that the phenomenon, whatever it was, didn't end with her. The last page was the one that would haunt researchers for years. It contained a single paragraph, unsigned, with no author listed. The subject's condition upon discovery does not align with environmental exposure, known wildlife behavior, or human involvement. Observations remain inconclusive pending further data. Recommend continued suppression of files to prevent misinterpretation by public or press. There was no closure, no explanation, no attempt at a narrative. Only silence, and the unmistakable sense that the truth had been dissected, erased, and buried. And yet, One notation at the bottom of the folder, written in pencil, likely added later, suggested someone inside the system knew far more than they admitted. 3 words. 3 impossible words. It wasn't alone. The shadow in the trees for years. The case of the unnamed girl had faded into rumor, then into silence. But the forest around Mount Shasta never forgot, and neither did the people who walked its trails. By the mid-2000s, hikers and campers, people with no connection to the original incident, began reporting something uncanny. Something that echoed her drawings, her screams, and the terrifying fragments buried in those declassified files. It always began the same way. A strange stillness in the woods, birds going silent, wind dying without warning. A pressure in the air, faint at first, then unmistakably like the moment before a storm, but colder, sharper. Witnesses described hearing branches shift even when nothing visible moved. Then, without warning, they would spot it. A figure, tall, motionless, perfectly still between the pines. Most described it as impossibly thin, its arms long enough to reach past its knees. Others said it looked stretched, like its proportions obeyed rules that had nothing to do with human anatomy. But every witness agreed on one thing: its outline was wrong. Not fuzzy, not blurred, misaligned, as though reality had trouble containing it. One hiker, a retired firefighter named Daniel Reed, filed a statement after a near-fatal fall on a ridge. His voice shook as he recounted how he had seen something black against black, a vertical shape between 2 trees. It wasn't walking, it wasn't breathing, it wasn't alive in any way he recognized. But when he blinked, it had moved. Not gradually, not naturally, just shifted, like a shadow dragged a few feet to the left, without crossing the space in between. Another witness, a mother camping with her 2 sons, said she woke in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps circling her tent. Slow, deliberate, heavy, yet uneven, as if the walker was rediscovering how to imitate a human gait. When she dared unzip the flap, she saw a silhouette standing beyond the firelight, tall enough to brush the lower branches. She froze. It didn't approach, it didn't retreat, it merely watched. She described feeling observed by something that didn't blink. Park rangers dismissed the accounts as misidentifications, bears rising on hind legs, tricks of moonlight, exhaustion, but the reports kept coming. Different people, different times. Same description, same impossible height, same terrible stillness. A trail cam photo surfaced briefly online before being removed. It showed nothing more than a row of trees, except for one anomaly: a narrow, elongated shadow stretching vertically across a trunk, darker than natural light should allow. Experts blamed compression artifacts, skeptics blamed but those who had seen it in person said the photo didn't capture the feeling, the sensation that the forest itself recoiled around the figure, leaving a subtle emptiness where it stood. And then came the whispers among local Karuk families. They said the presence matched the old warnings, the stories their elders carried. Unch felt the tall shadow of Awata, a traveler between places, something that appeared when boundaries weakened, something that followed patterns, something looking for someone. As sightings increased, one detail became disturbingly consistent. Witnesses reported the entity standing near the same elevation where the girl had once been found alone, speechless, and frozen with terror. And whether people admitted it or not, a quiet dread grew in the community. Because deep down, everyone felt the same chilling possibility. Whatever she encountered in those woods was still there, and it wasn't finished. The final theory: what really happened to her? In the years that followed her disappearance, investigators, journalists, and even amateur theorists tried to piece together the truth behind Jane Dotha, girl who emerged from the forest without a name, and who vanished again without a trace. With no identity, no record of her origin, and no discernible past, she became a case study in the limits of human knowledge. And slowly, 3 dominant theories took shape. None could be proven. All were unsettling. The first theory: a victim of an isolated abductor. Some believed she had escaped from a kidnapper, a reclusive individual living deep in the wilderness, hidden from society. They argued that her injuries, her silence, and her constant backward glances suggested long-term captivity. Supporters of this theory claimed that the burned circle, the scratches on nearby trees, and the strange scents were nothing more than environmental phenomena misinterpreted by frightened search teams. But this explanation faltered under scrutiny. No footprints, no shelters, no food waste, no snare lines, no signs of human presence within miles. And no predators showed behavior consistent with keeping a child alive in such a remote area. Even in the wildest corners of Mount Shasta, captors leave traces. This one, if real, left none. The second theory: an extreme case of traumatic fugue. Psychologists proposed that she might have fled an abusive environment far from the mountain, wandering alone for days in a dissociative state. Her silence, her avoidance of eye contact, her inability or unwillingness to write her name aligned with severe trauma responses. Perhaps she had stumbled into the forbidden zone by accident, but the logistics defied belief. A young child, alone, crossing unstable volcanic ridges, evading exposure, and reaching an off-limit zone accessible only by advanced climbers. The distances didn't match, neither did the timeline. Doctors estimated she survived conditions that should have been fatal within hours, and the cinder dust on her clothing came from a restricted region miles beyond any trail a child could realistically traverse. Which left the third theory, the one few dared to voice publicly: a direct encounter with something unidentified in the forest. This theory attempted to reconcile the burned circle, the missing camera footage, the metallic animal scent, the unexplained disturbances in the woods, and the sightings of the tall, silent figure that continued long after she disappeared. The Karuk spoke of a watcher, the unexplained entity tied to boundaries between worlds. Witnesses described a presence that moved without motion, observed without eyes, and left no tracks because it didn't walk the ground, it merely occupied it. Some believed the girl had seen it, others believed she had been taken by it once, escaped, and then reclaimed. Skeptics rejected this as superstition, but even they couldn't explain the final and most haunting fact. She vanished from a locked hospital ward without opening a door, triggering a camera, or leaving a single physical clue. It was as if she had simply ceased existing in this place, and returned to wherever she came from. In official archives, she remains a blank entry. Jane Doe. Origin unknown. Case inactive. In local memory, she is something else. A living ghost. A fragment of a story that was never meant to be told. A child who arrived from nowhere and disappeared the same way. And in the forests near Mount Shasta, hikers still whisper of a tall, motionless figure standing among the trees waiting, watching, as though searching for someone at once lost. But the truth, no matter which theory you choose, one thing remains undeniable. She should not have survived. She should not have disappeared. She should not exist, yet she did. And somewhere, something remembers her.